Yeah, so check this out. I went to a doctor for an examination, for my skin. I get ingrown hair whenever I shave my skin, right? And the guy looks at my name and says, Ephraim, you're Jewish. I was like, huh? I was like, hell no, I'm Nigerian. What are you talking about? And then this guy, mind you, this guy is Jewish. White guy, Jewish, a whole 9 yards. The guy looks at me and goes, you're from Nigeria? The Igbo tribe? Like, I'm taken back and I'm like, how do you know that? Yes. It's like, yes, so you are Jewish. I'm like, no, I'm Igbo. This man looks at me and says, the Igbo tribe migrated from Egypt, which before that, they migrated from Jerusalem when the Romans dispersed the Jews. So your entire bloodline is Jewish. I was like, what are you on? What you smoking? I'm out here looking at the doctor like this man is smoking something. And then I was like, okay, tell you what, I'm just going to go with it and I'm going to ask my mom later, right? So I called my mom. I was like, hey, Ma. So I just got out the doctor's office and this man looked me in the face. I was like, yo, you guys are all Jewish. My mom was like, yeah, you didn't know that? I was like, huh? How am I supposed to know that? Mind you, we're Christians, right? We're Igbo and all of this. And this woman is like, yeah, our entire tribe is Jewish. I was like, that doesn't even make sense. And then I started doing my own research. And turns out my name, Ephraim, is the name of an actual Jewish tribe, which is under the tribe of Joseph. Funny enough, my grandfather's name is Joseph. So I'm just mad. I'm like, yo, why didn't you guys none of you guys told me this? And I have strangers now telling me my own lineage. I didn't know what to do with this information. So now I got a whole rabbit hole I have to jump through later just to find out where all of us really came from. Like, this is crazy. I spent all night studying and I found a lot of stuff that I didn't even know existed. So I'm just going to dive right into it. I believe the first question somebody asked was why the Igbo Jews migrated and left Egypt. And somewhere around, I believe, 1200 BC, the Turkic armies attacked Egypt. The Turkic, I believe, are the ancestors of modern-day Arabs. They attacked Egypt, enslaving most of the Igbo Jews that lived there, most of the settlers of Egypt at that time, forcing a lot of people to flee. And one of those people were the Igbos. And we started migrating down southwest of the continent. And a lot of people were settling on those roads along the way. But ultimately, we ended up where we call Igbo land today. And a lot of you who study history would know that the first empire of the Igbos is called the Nri Empire. I didn't even know this, I just found out. The Nri Empire had a leadership structure where they had a priest-president type leader who was a direct lineage to God. Funny enough, it almost seems like it was mimicking the Egyptian pharaoh dynamic where the pharaoh was a direct lineage to God. The difference here is once the Nri Empire was established, they made it a point of focus that all the oppressed people come live in this land. If you were a slave and you ended up in Igbo land, you automatically became free. I think they were trying to harp on the fact that everywhere Jews went, they have always been oppressed and kicked out of their land. So anybody who arrived in Igbo land was automatically free, and they harped on promoting human rights and harmony amongst their neighbors. And funny enough, I started looking at the language, and it seems like most of our languages are actually similar. Like, for instance, Allah in Igbo means land. That's the same exact word for land in Egyptian language. Like Miri, water, the same thing. Nado or Mado, which means person, the same thing. Most of our languages are eerily similar to theirs, which I didn't even know this until I started looking. Now, the religious practices is I started looking at, okay, what did the Jews practice? and some of their belief system. The mourning of 7 days after somebody dies, you have to mourn. The Igbos do that as well. The period of circumcision after a male is born, the Igbos do the same thing as well. Practices, cultural rites, all of that. It seems almost like a mirror of itself. And I started looking at some of the other things that they might have taken from Egypt when they left. And some of the cultures and some of the tribes in Igbo land have a pantheon of gods, you know, the same way that the Egyptians did. And then they have a main god, which is called Chukwu, which is the head god, just like the Egyptians had Ra, where all the other gods fall underneath them. And if you look at the Yorubas, on the other side of Nigeria, their piercings, their tattoos, their practices are eerily similar to the Egyptians as well, which makes me think that once that migration happened, most people kept their Jewish practices. Most people harped more on the Egyptian practices. And also, there seems to be some sort of bleed over of that Arab takeover in some of the traditions that I found during my research. And there's a lot that I want to talk about, and I don't want to make this video too long. I'm going to address some other questions that I saw in that last video, in this upcoming video. Just stay tuned. I learned a lot in 24 hours, so you guys are not going to believe this. I'll see you in the next one's video. For the Igbo people in the comments asking me to expand on arrival. This gentleman right here, his name is Erigad, G-A-D. Erigad is the son of God, who is one of the sons of Jacob. Now, Erigad right here was born in Egypt and served as a high priest in the temple of Joseph. Now, when Egypt was starting to be attacked, he went ahead and gathered all of his people and fled Egypt through the Nile River, crossing the river Benue and subsequently the Niger River, arriving at a place that we know today as Anambra State. So, congratulations, by the way. If you are from Anambra State, you're in one of the original states of Igbo land. So Erigad had 4 children, 3 sons, 1 daughter. We're going to discuss 2 of them. The first one is Nri, and the second one is Aguleri. So Nri went on to establish the Anambra State, or the Kingdom of Nri, right? And in this kingdom, he welcomed a lot of outcasts. That's why if you go to Anambra State, they have a huge population of what is called Osu, or outcast. The members of that community have been there since we got there, because the Nri Kingdom opened their doors to runaway slaves, outcasts, people who are not liked by their community, and they welcomed them into their kingdom so that way they can live freely. Agulu, on the other hand, is responsible for most of our traditions, our yam festivals. Like whenever we have a gathering, the eldest member there has to crack the kola nuts. That's the Aguleri man, or the high elder. That's where that tradition comes from. So after their father died, these 2 combined to help expand Igbo land, sending out missionaries, building schools. They focus mostly on agriculture, and that's why we have a large history of agricultural practices down there in Igbo land. Things like yam, plantains, palm oil, all of those originated initially from these 2. Since the Erigad, their father, was a high priest in Egypt, he brought the same exact diplomatic style back home to Igbo land. So he taught his son Eri diplomacy, trade routes, agricultural practices, and how to build a community. And that's why if you see most of our Ezes, or kings, most of the kings are not just ruling the regular civilian population. They are also in charge of all our diplomatic practices, controlling the military, at least not today, but back in the day. You know, of course, the government is more democratic, Western style today, but our original practice was where the king, or the Eze, was in charge of every single aspect of our society. And that originated from Erigad, the initial founder of our community.
Which are an ancient community of the Israelite exiles. Now this is, for the most part, the general consensus of the largest people in Africa. You do have different groups like the Abudaya in Uganda, who aren't saying they're from the lost tribes, but have joined the people of Israel in the large amounts of numbers. One other location I'd like to, actually before I go into this other location, what's fascinating is, which I speak about, is the transatlantic slave trade. A large percentage of it actually came from Igbo territory. So these Igbo today in Nigeria who are practicing Jews, numbering the 40 million people with customs and traditions, doing circumcision on the 8th day, were the same exact people brought to the Americas on the transatlantic slave trade. Now, if someone goes to Times Square in New York today, you'll see African Americans dressed in Israelite outfits and yelling at people saying, "You're not the real Jews, we're the real Jews." And so most people saying, "Well, you guys are kooky, you just made this whole thing up, you made up a religion and an identity." Actually, no, they are the blood descendants, most likely, of the people who, from Israel, were brought from Africa to America. So it's very fascinating. But what they need